I'd just like to start by thanking everyone for coming out on such a beautiful day to sit inside of a gallery and listen to Anki talk about her work. It's a great privilege to come up here and talk to her in front of all of you in this wonderful show. Just sort of, I always love to start with sort of technical things. How long has this show been kind of coalescing in your mind?
So I found out that, or I was offered a space only right before the holidays. So, and I was in Norway for the holidays. So I came here for the first time on January 3rd and saw the space. And I was like, oh goodness, how am I going to fill this space? And then I went home and I said, oh, that is not a problem. I have so much work. So then it was to try to gather. I don't work in series. I don't work in, every painting is its own story, it's its own kind of adventure. So I had to like go back a bit to sort of pick and choose works that kind of felt like they were part of a whole. So that's also why the title became Then and Now, as in then I maybe have expressed this idea this way, and then later now I might express it in a different way. So yeah, so the whole thing came together really in 2 months.
Came together in 2 months, but it represents, what would you say, how many years worth of work?
More than a decade,
More than
so yeah, 10 to 15 years probably of selected works.
And walking through the show, one notices some themes. There's some things that are sort of directly from, I think, recognizable from mythology or folklore or religious imagery. There are symbols that are sort of unique to your work. While the pictures are very simple, there is, one can sort of sense a landscape, sense vegetation. I wanted to go back to, your origins and talk about, if you could talk about, did you grow up with a certain mythology or folklore or something that kind of began to color your vision of the world and history and how the world works?
Short answer, yes. But the long answer is, I grew up in Norway, and I grew up very much connected to the forest. We were like the second to last house on my little dirt road, town, and then there was just forest.
Which town was this?
It's a small sawmill town about an hour north of Oslo, which when I grew up was like far from Oslo. Oslo was like some place we only went for very special occasions. My dad worked there, but it was like, it felt almost mythological in itself, this big town, Oslo. But I spent a lot of time in the forest, playing by myself, but also the folk tales, the fairy tales. I don't know how we absorbed them, but like I know that I read them later myself, but they were just really part of being. The trolls, the gnomes, all of these mythical creatures that we have were all part of just growing up. Like, as little kids, it was like, if you're not nice, the trolls will come get you. And
Do you have any run-ins with trolls?
not too many. And, they're not very smart, so
Okay.
we outwit them pretty easily. So some sort of mythology, storytelling, has definitely been part of, my psyche, where I'm coming from. But I also think in the way I work, where I don't work from any reference material, I don't, I just go into myself most of the time and pull images, or they just come out. There is something universal in a lot of these deep images in us, I think, that do come out no matter where you are if you let it happen.
Well, it expands. So we see, like, I mean, this is a perfect example, the kind of Hindu influence in some of the work, and we were talking about in the car ride up Sisyphus. That's obviously kind of entered into the kind of Norwegian pantheon. But there is a certain aesthetic, which I'll ask you about after, but I wanted to ask you, when did you know you were an artist? When did that begin to kind of enter into your consciousness?
Yeah, I think Jeffrey, I think you're here, you spoke about this on your blog. I know strange people. And I did not know that I was an artist when I was a child. I was not one of those people, like sometimes artists are like, I knew when I was 5 years old that I would be. I did not. I didn't know you could be an artist. I thought all of the artists were dead and their work hung in museums. You know, I didn't know any artists. So I was going to be a good girl and be an accountant and have a good job and, you know, be a solid person like everybody was around me. But I started studying accounting, and it wasn't going so well. Something was just not working, and I started I finished my 3 years of accounting studies, but then I kind of started over again, and I said, I'm just going to go do something that I think I enjoy, and I'm going to go take a year of this like practical arts year, which was like knitting and sewing and learning different things. But that was the first time I got introduced to oil paint. It was one of the teachers brought in these itty bitty tubes of oil paint, and we all got to sort of dab a little bit, and we copied a picture each from, pick a picture in a book and copy it. And we did, and that was really exciting. And I was like, there's something here that seems interesting.
Was this in Oslo? Where was this?
No, so this was still up this was either further north of Oslo in a town named Gran, So, because I also just had no idea what I wanted in life or what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. I just sort of followed wherever life would take me. And then the second year, I took a second year of that, and I moved to Lillehammer. So that was the first time I lived by myself, which I was quite shy and quite terrified, but it worked out, so I gained some confidence from that. And then I found an application for an art school in Oslo, sort of randomly hanging in the hallway. It was from the year prior, but I pulled it down and I was like, well, whatever. I sent it in with some slides, and then I got into that school. And it was the second year of that school, which I think happens in a lot of art schools, where the teacher said, only 10% of you will continue making art or something like that. And that's when it's like clicked in my head, solidified, and I was like, I'm going to be one of those. And then I was like, oh goodness, what does that mean? What is that? Am I becoming an artist? What does that mean? Yeah. So it was very much sort of like, just felt like I was being drawn down a path. Why did I get into that school in Oslo? I don't think I had anything to, like, how they chose me. It was kind of like, but I felt like it was meant to be, like, yeah.
And then was New York a sort of next step in that? Did you come to New York to study, or how did you end up?
I wish I could say that I was that organized, but no, I fell in love with an American, a musician in Oslo, my second year of going to that art school. So right around that same time that it solidified that I was an artist, that's where my track was going.
Basically, you loved artists too.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I met this guy, and he lived in New York. So what was I supposed to do? I packed up and moved over. Didn't even really think about it. Yeah.
Well, besides mythological imagery, there's this very clear sort of Gothic, macabre quality to the work. And, I know you pretty well. You are a very cheerful person. So I was quite curious, because you're not like a Gothic person. You're not deep
I
and
want to
quiet
be
and
that
kind
cool.
of, you're not like, there's not like a cloud over you when you're walking around and it's always dark and there's sort of a breeze blowing with like dead leaves. But how does this, like, is the Gothic just kind of emerge from the work? Do you just sort of funnel it into the painting, or are you there reading, you know, Wuthering Heights and sort of meditating on like bleak, pastoral sort of landscapes? I'm very curious where this kind of energy comes from.
So am I. That was one thing I worked, you know, I've been through a few different sort of periods, I guess, in my time as an artist. I studied till the point where I felt like I had some grip on like the different, you know, technical things. And then I went to an abstract painting class, and then I sat there and just pondering what in the world I was going to do for quite a while. And my first sort of group of paintings came from photographs, and they were photographs that I took myself. And then I might just find like a little inch in one photograph and I'd make that into the painting. So didn't always have a lot of reference, but just sort of something to pull from. And then I turned the camera to myself at some point and started taking pictures of myself and used that as reference for a lot of paintings. And then I left the reference material behind. And that's when this started happening, where if I just let the painting happen, these are the paintings that happen. And I don't feel like I decide that. It was something that I had to accept because, as you said, I'm a positive person. So why the paintings come out with so much darkness and melancholy, and I don't know. But I also really enjoy artwork that I usually say, like, I like artwork that kicks me in the stomach. You know, I want, like, that's what I want out of work. But little beautiful paintings can do that to me as well. I just saw the Art show in New York, and they're little beautiful paintings, and oh my gosh.
Which art show?
Edward Art.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and those come with such a punch, even though they're these beautiful, delicate patterns. So it's not about it being dark or heavy or anything like that. But yeah, it was something I had to accept. It's like, my mom's like, "Why can't you paint pretty landscapes?" Like, and I'm like, I don't know. This is just what happens when I paint, and then I have to accept that and try to do that to the best of my ability.
Yeah. And then as a sort of follow-up to that, you know, looking at the works, I mean, I know your work from before, so someone who's new to this will see your work and see your different kind of vocabulary of symbols. But there are certain things like the figure that kind of forms a U, which sort of headless with just hands and legs, or these sort of very sinuous forms of one figure to another. How do you develop, you say this is a show over the last 10, 15 years, so I'm curious how you develop these sort of symbols of your own, like the figures. When did you start extending them? When did you start weaving them together? What was the process? Was it purely aesthetic, or did you begin to say, I'm going to try and tell a story with this body?
Yeah, I never tried to tell anything. I always tried to discover something. So it's, all the paintings feel like they're really just for me. Mm-hmm. And if anybody else, finds something in them, that's like a bonus. But they're all about discovering. I go in completely blind every time. Every painting is like, how does this work again? I'm like gonna start putting some paint on here. Sometimes it's just cutting a piece of canvas. Maybe I hang it horizontal, maybe I hang it vertical, and then I just sit and look at it, and it's like, what will fit on this would be about two figures, and then I maybe start going after that. And sometimes it's just one figure. Sometimes I don't know what to start with, so I just start putting a lot of color on. That's also kind of a strange thing that many of these paintings start quite colorful. They start with reds and blues and yellows and greens, and then I start just taking down the color slowly until it becomes something that feels like, you mentioned nature a little bit, and I feel like there's a lot of nature in these, even though they're all of figures. I do think that nature is a part of what I do, like the Scandinavian dark, heavy, rugged nature always, I feel like, is part of it.
Well, like specifically the painting Row, I was very curious about. That, you know, most of these are singular figures and, you know, sort of the goddess, the, you know, sort of mourning figures or figures that are interacting. But Row, did you come to that with a narrative or an image? And then also just, it's kind of got this wonderful accretion and it gets very, very thick as you add paint. I mean, like, how did that one picture, like, if you walk us through making that picture, how did that happen?
Yeah, I would say that the digestion period for that painting was quite long. I found a sketchbook from 1996, so I'd just been here for a year, and I had little drawings in that of the wrapped bodies, like rows of them in different ways, and nothing happened. Like the image stayed with me. I think we've all seen those types of images on the news, and, you know, always when something tragic happens, and it was just something that kept sticking with me. And then I guess it was 20 years later, in 2016, I think that painting finally happened. And I knew I'd had it, like, waiting, you know, it's been sitting there. And then for some reason, like, the right size of canvas, the right size of something, and I was like, this is where this painting's gonna happen. And I do like being really physical and working large on my paintings. I feel like it gives it an energy that is hard to get in very small paintings when you're just up and down and you're working and painting. So that painting is, I feel like it's especially physical as I was doing it. I can't say why, but like the way the paint came on, like with a lot of probably emotion and you know.
Well, the off-white on the shrouds, which is sort of almost like a quarter-inch thick at times, was that just a kind of gestural action painting moment at the end, or?
Probably, I mean, within the whole process, yeah. I think I'd been building up to this painting for a long time, and when it finally happened, it kind of just like exploded onto the canvas, and yeah, it ended up being very physical.
Is the texture, there's a painting in the front room called Measure, and it seems that you've like applied pieces of fabric embedded in the paint.
Oh yeah.
I was curious about that. Like, is that I don't know if I saw that technique anywhere else, but I was curious because it was kind of a mummy shroud texture, and it kind of had inhabited the surface. So where did that come about, that process?
Yeah, that's something I started.
Are those old paintings?
That's something I started quite a long time ago when I was painting from photographs. I wanted more texture in my painting, so I would start sticking bits of cheesecloth, specifically, sometimes like little pieces of like things with sand, or kind of just trying to build up the texture a little bit ahead of time. So that might have been an older piece of canvas that I painted on, that I did that, and then at some point I don't have the patience to do that. I can't wait for it to, you know, to work on the building. I just want to get started painting as soon as the canvas is up, and so I stopped doing that, and now I just paint.
You don't just paint, because there's, if everyone takes a second look, I don't know if you noticed, but there's this wonderful machine in the middle of the gallery, and interspersed amongst the machine parts are these sort of small ceramic pieces. There's a really wonderful one at the back, on the back wall, which is gorgeous. But we started the day in near Meserole Street, heading out from Anki's studio, and I asked you about the sculpture, and so you showed me several sculptures. So you began, before the ceramic, so we'll talk about the ceramic, but before the ceramic, you began creating three-dimensional forms. And first off, you know, many artists do sculpture and painting, but what particularly caused you to start making sculpture?
I think the paintings, the way they're textural, and I really love like tactile, like the feeling of tactile. So I think it just brought itself into doing 3D things. And I always said I've dabbled in sculpture. I've made little pieces throughout time. I was showing you other heads, and heads are like what really comes out a lot. From probably 20 years ago, some of those pieces in paper mache and plaster and yeah, all different types of medium, cement. So they've been part of like the process. But you know, living in Brooklyn and the storage and all of that, it's hard to think about making sculpture. But then I was really stuck with my paintings, but 2.5, 3 years ago, something was not moving. I had a hard time pushing them forward, and I said, I'm gonna go do something I have no idea how to do. So I signed up for a ceramic sculpture class. This was not a pottery class. And just immediately got to work. It felt like I've been doing this forever already. And just, even though I didn't know the different clays, I didn't know how the glazes work, but I'm like, this is just, something I know how to do, even though I don't know how to do it. So that was really amazing, and a lot of these pieces here are some of the first of those. And I don't know why I knew how to do it, or like, I was gonna do the threads, and I'd never seen that before, but I was like, this is what I'm gonna do, and I don't question when those things happen. I just go with it. I made holes, I used a thread. I knew exactly what kind of thread I wanted to use, and it's a ridiculous thread to use for this process because it exists of tiny, tiny, tiny threads, and you're getting close to anything they'll catch. And inside the ceramic, as I'm trying to thread them through, it snatches on all the sharp edges inside there, because there's lots of sharp edges, and it took forever to do all those. But I was like, I can't use a thread that's really solid. It has to be this particular like fuzzy thread. I don't know why, but.
Well, I noticed also there's 3 heads sort of along the wall right here on the other side, and you can see the seam where you've cut the head off the neck, so you can then put the thread through the face, and also the thread goes over a face, which is really, so it's sort of a mask, but it's also part of the sculpture. But I do love the practicality of, you can see how you did it, which is very cool. Was that just you just said, but was that just sort of a momentary thing? You said, I think I'm going to try and put this thread here, or had you been looking at other artists, Gabo, things like that?
Well, I need to get into it, so I need to cut it open somehow, and then I'll try to cut it so I can just pop the part back on. And the first ones I did, I hid the seam, I glued them sort of back together and hid it. But then I was like, no, it's okay if it's visible. Like, so now I just keep them in the 2 pieces, and then I had the one on the other side with the moss, kind of in it, the 3 rows of moss, the light one. The person who fired it put the top on the bottom when they fired it, so it fused together with the glazing, which was not my intention. So then I had to find some other thing to do with the slits. I wanted to weave something through them. That was no longer possible. I also realized that you need 4 slits if you're going to weave something. So, you just follow it and see what happens. So I don't feel like there's ever any mistakes, because you can always then take it into something else, something new. You just always follow the medium and see where it goes.
There seem to be sort of 2 types of sculpture that you do. You have these ones that exist as their own thing, right? With the moss or with the string. But then I noticed that there are at least 2 sculptures that are from, well, I think you told me they're from the paintings. So, as I'm a sculptor, and as a sculptor I'm very curious, what was your interest in taking a painting and then making a sculpture from the painting? Because there's one where the body, where you have the leg going up and the arm going up, and then the branches coming out of the body, and then you have the two women or figures back to back, and so those are from paintings.
Yeah, a lot of them are crossovers from drawings and paintings. Yeah, I had this really like, oh my goodness, I can remake all my paintings in 3D. This is so fun, I can keep working forever. So I you know, as I'm working in clay, and if I don't have an idea, I can just go pull one of my paintings basically as something. And then, as you know, most of my paintings is a tall standing figure, which is a really not very smart thing to do in ceramics. It has to be hollow, and then and then I want to make it tall, and it's almost impossible, so I'm getting really good at fixing ceramics, because they break when you're making them, they break when they dry, they break when you get them in the kiln, they break when they come out of the kiln. So all of that is, you know, making new things happen in the work. But yeah, I just had fun pulling from the paintings. And we talked about this a little bit, that I think eventually the sculpture is going to start informing the painting.
Okay.
As I do more of it, I feel like it's going to be something that goes back and forth more, but currently it's more the sculptures speaking to the painting speaking to the sculpture.
Yes, I mean, some of the early hits you showed me in the studio, there is this quality to the painting of this sort of totem, this figural quality, which I almost feel like those heads that were sort of on these columns are kind of reference points to work from. I mean, have you ever worked from your own sculpture or drawn from it?
Not directly. I don't do much from life.
Yeah.
So, but the ideas, yeah, I have made, I would say, drawings or paintings that refer to some of it, but not directly.
And in the catalog for the show, I can't remember, the introduction is written by
Michael David.
Michael David. He talks about, I thought this was very interesting, a feminist reading of the imagery. And, you know, very often artists work and people interpret it. So it's helpful often to ask the artist if that was something that was going through your mind. I mean, this sort of figure here, which is a female form with, you know, sort of as a goddess. Do you feel that, you know, in a lot of these images, there is a kind of either a figure that is in an extraordinary circumstance, like holding the boulder, or has objects growing out of it, branches, or things like that. Are you making a statement, do you think? Or is this an autobiographical statement? What is, do you feel that's there, or do you accept it, that reading?
Well,
Like
you know,
right behind us?
I would say I am a feminist. I do believe in equality. But I'm not making any statements with the work. Like, I don't think, like, anything verbal is not part of my creative process. Like when I'm painting or sculpting, there's nothing verbal happening. So I can't even talk about ideas, because most of us, if we're talking about ideas, we're talking about something verbal, a concept. There's none of that in any of the work. So, you know, but it's all parts of me, of course. I think everything I dream, think, experience, probably everything I eat, it all somehow comes back out in the work. So whatever's being translated, you know, through my being into these artworks, I think it's all bits and pieces, you know.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the work, one can make connections to, I mean, I was looking at your bookshelf, so I know, but you can make connections to various artists who I think are inspiring or circulating in your consciousness. Can you talk a bit about the artists, the artists who've been most impactful in your practice from a conceptual?
Yeah,
What do
I
you
mean, I don't think any artist gets around Dustin. That's always, I think, almost everyone today. Somebody else who was really into Dustin was Susan Rothenberg, who some people have mentioned seeing my work. I definitely looked at her work a lot over a period, but that's now many, many years ago, so I feel like I'm definitely, there's something about the painterly quality that might be reminiscent, but I feel like my work is very different than what she did. I must admit that I look less at art history than more current painters. I think somebody like June Leaf or Louise Bourgeois, I really enjoy. But I feel less and less that I need to look at other painters for any sort of inspiration or anything like that. It's more for enjoyment. It's more just like, really enjoying other expressions, but not, I don't feel like I need to try to pull anything from anybody anymore.
I saw an Eva Hesse book on your shelf. Are you an admirer of her work?
Yeah, I love her sculptural work, her ideas and the colors in her works. Also her drawings are fabulous.
Yeah. And then the Norwegian question. I mean, when I wrote about your work a couple of years ago, I talked about Ibsen, but Ibsen and Munch and Grieg. There is an intensity and a kind of darkness to Norwegian cultural output. I mean, do you feel that you are a part of that? Did that kind of envelop you when you were growing up? This kind of.
I think we're just being from the same base of culture and nature. There's something connecting, but I didn't realize how much it was connected till I saw a show at the MoMA of Munch's work. This is now also many years ago, and I hadn't really looked at his work because it was too obvious. And then I saw the show and I was like, duh, Of course there's a connection, I can't get around that. But it's less like, I'm not looking at those artists, but I was actually in a show curated by an American who married a Norwegian who noticed that even today in all of the Norwegians. So she curated a show with a Norwegian or Scandinavian artist, and she called it Darkness Descends. And so it's just there.
The Swedes don't seem to be as dark.
No, they have a much lighter,
difference?
they have a totally different nature. They have gotten rid of all of their pine trees, and it's all just fluffy birches all over the country, and they don't have the dramatic mountains either. So I think that just makes a whole lighter personality. So they're just completely different.
Yeah. So what are you working on now?
I have a blank canvassing on my studio wall, and I don't know what it's going to be yet. So it's hard to say what I'm working on because I have no idea. Every painting is a new story, but there's been some things actually, because now I go see the Munch Museum every time I'm home in Norway, and there's been something tickling my brain about a lithography I saw of his that I might try to steal a little bit of.
Fantastic. I think, do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question for you. You said you went to the canvas kind of blank, and I worked similarly. But after you created these pieces, did you look into this whole business with this expression of appendages, lack of them, separation of them, addition of them? So even though that was not intentional, what did that do in your being, so to say?
Yeah.
You saw what evolved.
So the question was about the arms, and some have arms, some don't have arms, there's only arms, and that's also something I've had to question myself. I wonder why, but the paintings are never really about the figures as human figures per se. They are just something I hang my paint on. So if the arms don't give the expression that's in the painting anything, then they don't need to be there. And if they are supposed to give the painting something, then, or sculpture, then they show up. But I'm not trying to make big figures.
You said you don't do it intentionally. I was wondering what your reaction is to the work when you've completed it, and like how it evolves in your being, so to say.
Yeah.
Because you didn't do it intentionally.
Right. I think all of the paintings are rather mysterious to me as well, and I really enjoy that. I think artists are the best at being in the uncomfortable space of the unknown. Most humans do everything they can to not be in that space, and artists, that's the space we live in. So I don't need to understand why they do that, or I find them curious.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't need to know. I love that I don't know, and that they're something that people are like, what is this about? And I'm like, I don't know, first time I've seen it.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you so much, both of you. Anki, I was really struck by and really excited by the way you describe no verbal cues and no kind of conceptual words being associated with your work, and I'm just curious about how you choose to title, particularly because what I see in your titles is kind of an evocative, often singular word choice that is kind of in between something formal that we're looking at, but also something that maybe is evoking something conceptual. And I also think your work is generally not called untitled. So I'm just kind of curious about your naming process and what significance that has for you.
It has the significance that I try to remember what work is what. I do not, I had somebody help me organize a lot of my storage recently, and she was eventually able to guess the names of the paintings, because they're usually one or two words just sort of describing what's in there. Unfortunately, this has resulted in me naming many paintings and drawings exactly the same thing. And I had a show recently, and then I sorted the names alphabetically, and I realized I had 4 pieces named the same thing in the same show. I was like, I think I need to be a little bit better at, they have different sizes and different things, but I need to be a little better at titling them so I know. I also had that a collector come to my studio, and they're like, they had asked for the painting named Hold, and I pull it out, and I'm like, here it is, and they're like, that's not the painting I wanted to see. So I do need to be better at, but they're literally, once the photographer has been there and taken the pictures, and I sit and name them, I just name them. Yeah. So again, nothing verbal about that. They just have to have a title so I remember which one is which.
I have a question. Hi, Anki. Great questions, great dialogue. I also can really relate to this experience of the painting doesn't live in a verbal space. If it would live in a verbal space, then, it would be nice to write something. But so it doesn't follow a concept, it doesn't follow a verbal space. So what is the experience of this stroke and now it's complete? What tells you?
Yeah, my studio has a corner, and I constantly ask myself as to why do I know that this has to be here and not here? Why does I'm like, no, this is just completely wrong, and I'm like, why, how do I know that? Like the painting Wait in there with the person kind of under the white field. I had a piece of sky above that, and I thought it needed that, and I kept looking at it. I was like, I can just tell that is completely wrong, and then I took it out, and I was like, yeah, why? it's not in the like composition rules, it's not, you can learn all of those things,
Yeah.
but ultimately trusting that whatever this intuition or feeling of, it just has to be like this, that is something. Yeah, that's part of the whole,
It's more like a physical, almost like a physical experience.
Yeah, it is like a physical experience. I can tell that is wrong. But when I work, I often, when a piece starts coming to, I start feeling like it's solidifying. I put it on the side and then I work on a new piece and I kind of like, keep glancing at it out of the corner of my eye. And suddenly I'll see something, oh, I realize I have to fix this. Or if nothing happens and a week goes by or, longer, then I'm like, I think it's done now.
Oh,
Yeah. So I sort of like use this, just out of the corner of my eye for a little while.
So there is a dialogue between you and the creation. And
Yeah.
then eventually the creation lets you go and then you go.
Yeah, that's very well said. Yeah, the creation just lets you know when it's done.
Yeah.
If it keeps bugging you. I mean, I've had paintings where I thought they were finished, I had them photographed, I had them, but then I never send that image to anybody. And then I was like, if that was a good painting, I would not just sit on it like this, and then I'll often pull it back out and go back into it. Yeah, so that happens too. Sometimes, that you didn't push it far enough, it's not quite there, but it's like, I thought it was good enough, and that never works. I just kind of didn't want to take it to that next step because you have to break something to move on, and sometimes that's hard. So time can help that.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Any other questions? I'll do you first and Jeffrey next.
I would love for you to share your working process with us, just in terms of the rhythm. Is there a certain time you like to work? Length of time?
Yeah, the work process. I'm not an A or a B person. I'm sort of like 10 to 6 is when I'm functional. So that tends to be the time that I work. And I would say that 80%, maybe more of the time you work on a painting is just looking at it or being other places and thinking about it. Or so always like, how long does it take to make a painting? In some ways, every painting takes your whole life because you wouldn't make exactly that painting unless you had lived all of your experiences up till then. So physical working time might be a week to 2 weeks, but then, it's very hard to say, because so much of it is just being there with it or thinking about it and sort of chewing on it in the back of your head, and but that's Jeffrey.
I guess we can all say that the awareness that comes from a lot of your Norwegian background, but I was kind of curious about how is all the years you spent living in New York, how has that affected your work? And maybe if you can't tell how it's affected the work itself, maybe just your perspective as an artist.
Yeah, that's interesting. How all of the time in New York has affected the work. So I now have been in New York longer than I was in Norway. I think seeing all of the artwork, like all of the best of the art in the world comes to New York, and you get to see it and you get challenged by it and pushed by it, and sometimes you want to throw your brushes out the window and go like, why do I even bother? And other times you're like, oh, I would go home painting now, I saw something really awesome. So I think just being in that energy that New York has is probably been completely, detrimental to my work. I have no idea what kind of work I would make if I was in Norway. I never know how to express this, but there is something about if things are like really easy for artists, sometimes that doesn't result in really good work. And and the struggle and both the immense support between the artists in New York, all of you showing up here for me today, like, thank you so much. And a little bit of the healthy competition, you know, I think is, like, there's no place else like that. Yeah. So I think New York's been incredible. I think I was meant to be here, you know. I think that relationship was just an excuse to get me here. All right, well, I'm going to be here for the next hour. I'm also going to be here tomorrow. I want to thank James Martin so much for inviting me to the show here. I want to thank everybody here at the Lace Mill so much for helping out, supporting, gallery sitting. It's been fantastic. And thank you so much for all of you to come. I'm just so deeply moved by everybody coming to see the show. Thank you to everybody who's written. Thank you so much for taking, you know, this pretty much the whole weekend to come and do
It's great
this.
to be here. Thank you for such a wonderful show.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.